Louise, thank you again for joining us, continuing the conversation. I'm thrilled to be chatting with you. I have one or two very specific questions that I want to ask you, but I think before we dive in, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Opportunities Exchange.
Sure. My name is Louise Stoney. I have been in the field of early care and education for well over 35 years. I've basically been an independent consultant. So I've worked pretty much with, I would say, at least 40 of the 50 states at some point in my career. About 15 years ago, I co-founded Opportunities Exchange because I realized that I had been working on the policy and finance side, but the reality was if we didn't really fundamentally understand the business model of childcare and help these programs be more sustainable, it didn't matter if we poured more public funding into them. We weren't going to be able to get the results we wanted. So that was when I began to sort of really try to lift up the hood, understand the core drivers financially and programmatically for the field, and really begin to launch an organization that was focused on transforming the business of early care and education so that programs could be financially sustainable and also offer high quality.
Louise, that is fascinating. And I had the pleasure of sitting on a panel with you at the June 27th National Child Care Innovation Summit. And I felt two things. I felt one, we were towards the end of the day, but people were just hanging on your every word. You had them in the palm of your hand, cracking jokes. And I also think that you made a very interesting and a very important point, but it was right at the end of the panel. And so that's, as the name of the podcast would imply, we're continuing the conversation. And so I wanted to ask you, you said to the audience, I want to leave you with this. Do we have a childcare desert issue? Do we have a data issue? The answer is yes. And the crowd literally went, ooh, right? And so I wanted to open that back up. Let me know, what do you mean by yes to both, but also is it not quite as straightforward as people think it is? Because childcare desert's thrown around a lot. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. Yeah, the issue of childcare deserts is thrown around a lot. And without question, we have a problem with the supply of childcare. But the problem is that the data that we're currently using to define childcare deserts is totally inadequate and often really misleading. And the problem is because we're using the data that we have instead of the data that we need. So when we talk about childcare deserts, what we're really talking about is we need to know how many vacant seats are available in early care and education programs across the United States, regardless of who funds that program, regardless of who runs that program, right? If you think about it from the perspective of a parent, they're looking for a place to enroll their child. And the reality is, we don't know. We don't have data on vacancies. We don't have data on actual enrollment in early care and education programs. What do we have? We have data on licensed capacity. That's basically a theoretical number. Like, how many spaces can you, how many children can you, in theory, put in this space, right? And yes, some licensing is a little more precise around groupings and aging, but it's nowhere near inaccurate. In fact, there was recently a study out of the University of Virginia that highlighted exactly how inadequate licensing data is to track actual supply. So that's the primary thing we use. Number one is childcare licensing data. Number two, there's tons of early care and education programs that aren't licensed. They're not illegal. They're not legally required to be licensed. Any program that's in a public or private school, for example. In many states, any program that's in a religious organization. So we're missing data on all those programs. What we often try to do to fill the gap is to collect data on publicly funded children, for example. That's not very accurate either, and it's certainly not tracking vacant seats. Sometimes we also ask for provider survey. That's probably the closest we're getting, but again, unless you're very, very precise about how you're asking the question, the way you're collecting the data, you often get apples and oranges, because what one provider calls a vacancy or what one provider calls a 1-year-old might be different than an infant might be different than another space. So bottom line, we have a serious data problem. And we believe that that's leading us to have very bad data on childcare supply. We often group it into large categories of children, again, because we're trying to make sense out of data that isn't precise enough. We need to change that. We need to get precise data on actual vacancies in programs. And Opportunities Exchange believes this is a problem that we can solve. And it's a problem that industry innovators can lead, which is really exciting for us. So here's where we're going with the solution. Number one, we believe that the way to collect this data is to go to the program itself. If you are harnessing the power of modern technology, and every early childhood program is using a child care management system, CCMS, we call them. These are basically off the shelf products that are used to help child care programs run their businesses. Those programs allow you to check children in and out electronically every day with a QR code or a parent's a fingerprint or facial recognition. There's a variety of different ways they do it, right? But they are tracking children in seats every single day. You can also check staff in and out every single day. When you have data on staff, you have data on staff capacity. That's potential seats. When you have data on children enrolled, that's whether the seats are full. You put those two data sets together, and you can actually know where your vacancy is, and you can sort it by age of child, by location of program, by hours, by all the things that we need to sort data. The issue is we have to build the capacity to collect that data. And that's what we're doing right now at Opportunity Exchange. We're working on a protocol for how we would collect and express these data. And we're working with the technology vendors that are building the child care management software that early childhood programs are using. So that, and we're actually very soon going to be testing that in some cities and states. Now, we are also simultaneously, one of the big things that Opportunities Exchange does is to encourage early parent education programs to use modern technology. We believe that early care education is one of the last sectors to benefit from the technology transformation, and we believe it's really holding the field back. So we have a whole body of work that's about bringing child care management software to programs, helping them to use it, giving them the support they need to make sure they're using it for every child, every family. I kind of think of that as building infrastructure. Once we build that infrastructure, and by the way, we're doing this in partnership with states, with cities, with intermediary organizations, with foundations, right? With third-party funders and regulators and administrators that will help shift the field so that everyone is using the software. Once we build that infrastructure, right, those roads and bridges, and then we have a protocol for collecting the data, we'll actually have a way to collect real, or maybe not real time, but near real time. Potentially real time, but I would say real time. But certainly pretty accurate data on where we have available seats. We think that's super important and could be groundbreaking.
Yeah, I think groundbreaking is the best way to describe that. Regular listeners to the podcast will know that in addition to focusing on child care policy, I'm also in the thick of it with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I can tell you that if this technology was widely available 1 to 3 years ago, my experience would have been completely different finding spots for my kids.
I just want to build on that and say that I've been talking specifically about counting supply, but the same infrastructure technology would allow you as a parent to not only search for a slot, reserve that slot, enroll in that slot, pay for that slot. Like all this stuff could be done electronically, which is exactly what families want and need.
Well, and so we talk about increasing capacity, and capacity can mean different things in different contexts as it pertains to childcare. But I think about childcare providers. We talked about unlicensed childcare providers. I think a lot of people automatically think of childcare centers. There's family childcare homes. What roadblocks or what information gaps do you see for? And I'm thinking of in a 2,000-person town in South Dakota, right? That maybe has like 4 or 5 family childcare homes that are sort of the go-tos. Like, how do you reach those providers who are sort of the backbone of their community, but are wearing all the different hats? They're providers, they're accountants, they're administrators.
Yep.
How do we identify the supports that they need, and how do we get them those supports?
Well, certainly we can reach them, and we 100% believe that modern technology can benefit those providers. In fact, we find it's interesting. And when we start to work with home-based childcare providers who think, oh, I don't really need technology. I only have a few kids. And they start realizing, oh my goodness, here's what I can do. It is saving me so much time. And I can run it off my cell phone. I don't even have to have a fancy computer. So I 100% believe that there are ways to help these small providers both address the administrative burden and to improve their lives. Who the best messengers for them are often community-based organizations, the child care resource and referral agencies in their community, other nonprofits in their community, or their provider association. So we are agnostic as to who delivers the message. And in fact, we believe that the best person to deliver the message is the group that's closest to the provider. And we're also very committed to, we understand that it's not just about giving a provider a free subscription. By the way, we believe that these subscriptions ought to be free, and we work with states and communities and foundations to underwrite the cost. Even though it's not a high cost, for a provider, any cost is a barrier. So that's number one. And then number two, we work with helping the nonprofit organizations that work with these providers to understand, how do you do business coaching linked to the software? How do you, what kinds of information do they need? So that you're basically helping a provider solve their day-to-day business problems at the same time as you're teaching them business management. It's a really cool strategy. It's very hands-on, and it works.
Well, and speaking of business models, business strategies, troubleshooting business issues, Louise, where do you see, chambers of commerce, industry leaders, the gestures broadly, business community, fitting in this vision? Because I think there's a role that they can play, but curious how you see business communities partnering with these tech leaders, partnering with childcare providers to sort of help spread that information.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think number one, they can be really helpful in terms of encouraging and supporting a good business management and technology. The reality is that childcare businesses are really hard to run, really complicated, because there's so much detailed information that you got to keep track of. The good news is computers love rules, right? So a lot of this stuff can be automated, and so the business community can help by helping us bring technology to providers, helping us link training and supports to that technology. So that's number one. I think the second issue, and this is somewhat of a departure from what I've been talking about so far, but I think it's super important. One of the things that I talked about at the summit was the issue of microcenters. The issue that we have to be able to, right now, we currently have two categories of care. We have childcare centers and we have family childcare homes. And in most states, sort of got to be one or the other. But what if you're just like a one-room early childhood program? Maybe you're on site at an employer, or you're in some vacant space in a school, or in a community organization or a strip mall, right? But it's a small space. It's not really a full-blown center. You're not really going to be able to comply with the rules for a childcare center, which is why most small sites don't make it. You're really much closer to a family childcare home, and yet you're not allowed to be licensed as a family childcare home in most states. So helping to address that barrier is crucial. We're working right now with quite a few states that are interested in enabling small sites, in making microcenters more possible. But there's lots of roadblocks. And one of those roadblocks is local. I'm working with a particular state right now that is totally ready to make changes at the state level, but the local fire marshals don't get it. They think, wait a minute, no. You want me to apply residential standards to a commercial setting? I can't do. So I think there's a big learning curve that needs to happen. And again, if the business community can help us make common cause with those local folks that are building code inspectors and fire code inspectors, so they understand what childcare is about, why we regulate it at the state level, how they can support that. There's just lots of, because these local barriers are often killers for expanding something. And they're often not intentional. It's just people haven't connected the dots.
Well, Louise, I feel like every time we chat, I learn something new and you help me connect the dots. So I hope that this is the first of many episodes that we get to have a chat like this. Before we go, where can folks learn more about the work that you're doing, both on childcare deserts and data, but also just everything that Opportunities Exchange is up to?
Great, excellent question. So two ways you can learn. Number one, you can go to our website. We have a ton. We believe in. We're very transparent. We put tons of stuff up on our website. Our goal is to really share what we learn. So go to our website, sign up for our mailing list. You'll get regular updates on things that we do. The second thing is come to our national conference. We have a great conference that we do every year. This year's conference is going to be in October in Orlando. And it's just like a room filled with innovators who are just learning from one another, sharing really cutting edge ideas. It's a totally exciting space to come, and it's a great way to get involved in it.
And plus, October is absolutely the best time to be in Orlando. So
There you go.
That's a win on several levels right there.
Oh yeah, actually we're having it at SeaWorld, which is so you can bring your family, and there's even a splash pad for your toddlers. So hey, come join us.
That's incredibly inclusive. Louise, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Again, not the last time we'll talk.
Okay.
It was lovely to be on a panel with you on June 27th, the National Child Care Innovation Summit, and equally lovely to chat with you today. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Bye-bye.